The Peruma Talks 2025 today. Let's reflect on our enriching journey. We began on April 7th with an electrifying session by Ms. Kanimozhi Karunanidhi on the topic Indian democracy. The following day, Dr. M.V. Pillai, a renowned oncologist, offered hope with his down-to-earth presentation on cancer and remedies. On April 9th, Justice K. Chandru, former judge of Madras High Court, shed light on the Indian judiciary and its challenges with respect to polity. On April 11th, Ms. Ashwini Nachappa, Olympian and cine actor, highlighted the topic sports as a public health imperative. Yesterday, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, a world-renowned scientist and former WHO Deputy Director General, enlightened us on the topic One Health. Today, the last day of Peruma Talks 2025, we are delighted to have a session by the doyen of India's print journalism. He is the former editor-in-chief, the Hindu group of publications, the most respected Padma Bhushan, Mr. N. Ram. On behalf of Pinarayi Peruma 2025, on behalf of Peruma Talks 2025, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the session. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. The session will be chaired by Dr. N. Sajan, Associate Professor of English, who retired from Srinarayana College, Kannur. He is an academic who has published articles on art, cinema, literature, and food culture. His recent article in the History and Culture of Thalassery was published in the Malayalam anthology Thalassery, Charitravum Samskaravum. On behalf of Pinarayi Peruma 2025, on behalf of Peruma Talks 2025, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. N. Sajan to the session. Thank you. Over to the chair, moderator Dr. N. Sajan.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are in fact fortunate enough to see and be with one of the top journalists of the country, Padma Bhushan Narasimhan Ram, who is popularly known as N. Ram. N. Ram is an Indian journalist and a prominent member of the Kasturi family that controls the Hindu group of publications. Ram was the managing director of the Hindu since the year 1977 and its editor-in-chief since 27th June 2003 until 18th January 2012. Ram also headed the other publications of the Hindu group such as Frontline, the Hindu Business Line and Sports Star, and has been awarded the Padma Bhushan by the Government of India and Sri Lanka Ratna by the Government of Sri Lanka. He was the eldest son of G. Narasimhan, who served as the managing director of the Hindu from 1959 to 1977. Ram is a great grandson of S. Kasturi Ranga Iyengar, the patriarch of the Kasturi family that owns the Hindu. Ram did his schooling at Madras Christian College High Secondary School in Chennai. He graduated from Loyola College with a bachelor's degree in arts in 1964 and received a master's degree from Presidency College in 1966 and later an MS in comparative journalism from Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. Ram began his career in the Hindu in 1977 under the editorship of his uncle G. Kasturi. He served as an associate editor of the newspaper till the retirement of Kasturi in 1991. In between, he also served as the Washington correspondent for 2 years, that is 1980 to 1982, and still he is a well-known journalist who keeps thinking, writing, speaking. On behalf of Peruma Talks 2025, may I welcome Sri N. Padma Bhushan N. Ram to our midst for this talk of the day. Please give him a big hand. Just 2 more minutes, sir, to complete the main announcements. As usual, today also we have an award to be given away towards the end of the session by Sri N. Ram, and there will be a jury to judge the best question of the day. And the jury is comprised of Dr. Manjula KV, Mr. Dinesh V, who is the convener of the jury committee, and Ms. Anjuna KM. On behalf of Peruma Talks 2025, a warm welcome to all the 3 jury members. And as usual, we have the Peruma request to all the esteemed participants, please keep your cell phone switched off or in silent mode until the whole session is over. And we also request you to be in your respective seats until the end of the session so that there is minimum movement and less disturbance when the talk is on. Last, we have 2 segments. There will be a 40-minute or 45-minute session. That is the first part of the session where Sri N. Ram will address us, will talk to us about media today. And after that, we will have the segment for interactive participation. Over to you, Padma Bhushan N. Ram, for your talk. And I warmly welcome all the esteemed people in front of me gathered here at Pinarayi Convention Center, representing various organizations, institutions, and also the general public. Once again, a warm welcome, and over to you, Ram sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sajan, and friends, I'm delighted to be here today in this Pinarayi Panchayat. This is my first visit to, first occasion to participate in the Pinarayi Peruma. And what a wonderful festival it has been. Earlier, of art, music, cultural activities, film, and so on. And this year I learned you had talks on issues that matter, or some issues that matter. And this is the last the series of talks. I'm delighted that this Panchayat has done us proud when we talk about reflecting the culture of an important region, a beautiful region, a locality, and to see such a magnificent convention center with this auditorium here and the kind of interest there is in these activities, I'm really inspired. And of course, it's the brainchild of the Chief Minister of Kerala, Sri Pinarayi Vijayan. I spent some time with him in his house today. We had lunch there, and I've known him for a very long time. I think it's a wonderful celebration of the development of this part of India. I was also here some time ago to attend the first Library Congress of India, many years after independence, and that was in Kannur, and it's inspiring to see the development of the library movement in every panchayat in this part of Kerala. I think many states have far fewer libraries than Kannur alone. And I think it's wonderful to experience this. My topic for today is the state of the media, or reflections on what's happening in the media today. I'll provide some broad brush observations, and if there is interest, we can go into detail. India has had a long tradition of meaningful journalism. Journalists were part of the freedom struggle. Our printed press is well over 2 centuries old. In a serious sense, they helped to form public opinion, even in the days when circulations were very small, because information gets transmitted in different ways. And the media, the printed press, has made a significant contribution to the formation of this public opinion, and also to raise awareness among people of the importance of freedom itself in various stages. And many of the leaders of the freedom struggle were themselves outstanding journalists. They wrote for publications, starting, of course, with Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Mahatma Gandhi, and many others in different parts of the country. And the institution I represent is very much part of that tradition. There are also others in Kerala and elsewhere who represent that tradition. It's a tradition of serious journalism, purposeful journalism, sometimes ponderous. If you look at the old newspapers, we have, the Hindu has digitized its archives going back to the 1880s, and others have done that as well. And if you go to that, you see a very important difference from then and now. You had newspapers of record. You go back. Detailed reporting of speeches, of decisions, of happenings, interviews, descriptions of large meetings, the mobilization of people, and so on. Very accurate. Every reporter then had to learn shorthand, and you see this reflected in the newspaper of record tradition. That gradually changed, and the press was still very relevant, and its role was influential in the early years of independence, notwithstanding the small circulations. You're talking about 70,000, 80,000, 100,000, that's it. A very small part of the population was reached by printed newspapers, but there were various multiplier effects at that point of time. The press faced many challenges under British rule. Censorship, draconian penalties were imposed, fines, newspapers were shut down, sedition charges were leveled against editors, most famously Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Mahatma Gandhi himself. They were subject to sedition proceedings and even convicted, but the press stood its ground. By and large, it stood up, and it was an independent press by and large. There were sections, of course, that were supporting the British Raj, and that is reflected later on also. The laws, on the whole, supported freedom and independence, free speech. The Constitution of India, in Article 19(1)(a), safeguards or guarantees freedom of speech and expression, and Article 19(2) provides for reasonable restrictions enacted by law under 8 heads. I won't go into the details. Students of journalism are either maybe familiar with this or can look it up. By and large, we could live with that. There were some illiberal provisions of the laws, such as the law of criminal defamation, sedition, the Official Secrets Act, and so on. But for many decades, these were not resorted to by those in authority. Criminal defamation was, to a certain extent, we say the process was the punishment, but it was rarely followed through. So by and large, it was an acceptable state of affairs. Then came the emergency of 1975-77, imposed by the Indira Gandhi regime after she was disqualified. The Allahabad High Court verdict, Allahabad Court verdict, and we saw a dark period of censorship for a couple of years. But that regime was peacefully overthrown through an election, and the post-emergency period saw the flourishing of the press, independent journalism, investigative journalism. So you had a return, a revival of vigorous journalism, people-oriented journalism, journalism that exposed misdeeds, that blew the whistle on drought and famine when people were suffering. And I think it was celebrated in many parts of the world. Articles appeared, there's a literature on this whole period, and the post-emergency press goes down in history as one of the best performing newspaper traditions, at least in the developing world or in emerging nations. This was a state, I'm not going, later television came on the scene, initially government control, and later it was opened up, satellite TV, and even today, television is a major news medium in India, although news television itself is a very small part of the total industry, television industry, entertainment dominating the picture. News television still matters. Now I come to the present. We have to do a reality check. Recently I was interviewed by Stephen Sacker for Hard Talk, BBC's Hard Talk, and there was a discussion on the state of the media, the news media in India, and the problems that it faces. For those interested, it's still available on YouTube, put out by BBC India. But today, there is a real problem. The government that took office in Delhi in 2014 has shown little tolerance towards independent investigative journalism, those who push against its policies. The Bharatiya Janata Party government, headed by Prime Minister Modi, has taken the path of authoritarianism, softening up and wherever possible, suborning constitutional and democratic institutions and undermining India's already stressed secular foundations. These actions have been extensively reported in India as well as abroad, yet they are worth repeating. The government has brought executive power to bear on the independence of two constitutionally empowered institutions, the Election Commission of India and the Supreme Court, which in the assessment of some critical lawyers has been turned largely into an executive court. There have been changes in the most recent period. There have been some fine decisions by the Supreme Court of India and the High Courts as well. Relief to journalists who have been denied bail for a long period. Other decisions, the most recent, the most celebrated being the latest judgment of the Supreme Court, the two-member bench of the Supreme Court on the Tamil Nadu government versus the governor case. There's interest, we can talk about it because this has been extensively reported in the press and is currently the subject of debate on federalism in India, state rights, and so on. This is important. The Central Union government has conducted targeted assaults on freedom of expression, media freedom, media independence, and other fundamental rights. It has used anti-terror, sedition, and other draconian laws to incarcerate journalists, students, human rights defenders, civil society activists, and troublesome critics of the government, often without bail or trial for prolonged periods. And in international rankings of media freedom, India fares very poorly indeed. Since 2014, India has been declining steadily in these rankings, and in the ranking of world press freedom put out by Reporters Without Borders, which is the standard assessment published every year, India, in the last survey, ranked 159 out of 180 countries and territories which figure in this index. Government spokespersons have disputed these rankings, to be fair, but I don't think they provide much detail or much reasoning behind their challenges to these rankings. It's a matter that can be discussed when you do comparisons on that scale, but it shows a dismal picture when it comes to media freedom. The government has almost certainly conducted illegal surveillance against a large number of journalists, politicians, civil society activists, and other selected targets by deploying NSO groups, that Israel's NSO groups, military-grade spy Pegasus. I am a petitioner in the case before the Supreme Court, along with Sashi Kumar, and the Supreme Court went to a certain limit, to a certain extent, and appointed an expert committee headed by a retired Supreme Court judge to look into the matter, but the matter has not gone further. Most recently, the government has made a concerted effort to police and censor the internet, social media streaming platforms, such as Netflix, and also digital news providers through legislation or proposed legislation. Legislation such as the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, and now the Broadcasting Services Act, a bill which has gone to a committee, and we don't know what will happen to it in future. This is a serious matter because in recent times, given the decline of print journalism and the economic difficulties faced by some news organizations, and also because of the repression of independent journalism, quite a few talented journalists, notably, say, Ravish Kumar, they've gone out and become their own news providers on YouTube and other channels. And attempts are being made to censor that as well through new laws. And they have gone quite far. It's extremely difficult to censor the internet because there's an international organization that has to be approached. Their standards may be different from yours, but they take a shortcut and pressure the service providers to block. And recently, a cartoon published by the Wiggerton Group on Wiggerton Plus, available only to digital subscribers. The cartoon was about Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. That whole website was blocked for several days. But the blocking was very inefficient, and a number of people had access to it. I also had access to it. I subscribed to it, so on. It shows the difficulty of blocking it. Nevertheless, it is a matter of serious concern that serious journalism, when they do it on an individual basis, Ravish Kumar, Dhruv Rathi, is not a journalist but has become a very successful news provider or ideas provider on these platforms, on YouTube in particular. There is an attempt to curb and muzzle such services. So you can go on. There have been very specific attacks, the most notable being the attack on NewsClick, citing terrorism laws. And Prabir Purkahasta was arrested, but because of a bungled procedural issues, he was given bail and is now out. But NewsClick has been virtually paralyzed by these concerted attacks by 5 government agencies, including the Enforcement Directorate, the Income Tax Department, the special cell of the Delhi Police, and so on. And so these are highly targeted attacks. You will also remember the coverage of the farmers' protest in Delhi, where well-known journalists like Mrinal Pandey, FIRs were filed against well-known journalists including Mrinal Pandey, also Shashi Tharoor, Rajdeep Sardesai, and so on. Of course, they were not arrested, but sedition charges were sought to be imposed. But as many of you know, the Supreme Court has stayed the sedition law. So the law has come back in a different disguise in the new code that has replaced the IPC. These raise very serious concerns about the prospects of those who want to investigate, to report honestly, to dig deep into what is going on. People who are credible, serious journalists. I'm not talking about some rabble-rouser, somebody practicing yellow journalism and so on. These are well-known journalists. Mrinal Pandey, one of the most respected editors in the Hindi journalism, and of course Rajdeep Sardesai, who's still active on television. My point about this is there are still spaces, there are still voices. In a country like India, it is extraordinarily difficult to suppress these voices because India is diverse, India is pluralistic, India is multilingual, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, multi-political, multi-everything. And a country as vast and diverse as ours, it's extraordinarily difficult to shut out or shut down all expressions of dissent or criticism, particularly criticism affecting the image of the Prime Minister or the Home Minister and certain others, and also in some states where strongmen rule, like Uttar Pradesh, very harsh targeting of critical individuals and voices. But it is extraordinarily difficult to do it. That is the good news, because many people have lost hope because there is a climate of fear. But in recent times, particularly after the last Lok Sabha election, I notice a stirring of dissent across the country. We see critical voices on the new social media platforms. We see it also in the legacy press. Television is another matter. But for so-called national television, that is the English language, there's been a concentration of ownership, increasing concentration of ownership, the brutal takeover of NDTV through economic pressures, economic raids, use of these agencies and so on. And the picture there is less optimistic. We can be less optimistic about that, but we don't know enough about Indian language television, news television. We just don't know enough. In states ruled by the opposition, in various parts of the country, I suspect that there are voices that should give us hope. Now, you can ask me, why is journalism so important? I'll come to that, and then I think we can finish on that note. Why should we value journalism? Because young people, according to surveys, read less. They don't read printed newspapers. They don't even go to one particular news provider. They get their news from various social media platforms and so on. They can't even identify, a large number of them, where they learn things when you talk about current affairs. So what is the big deal about journalism as a profession? I think the answer lies in partly our history, that information and the news media can play and have played a substantive and even a crucial role, as I mentioned earlier, in the formation of public opinion in society and in shaping public policy on major issues that matter to people and society. Research has shown, particularly the work of Professor Amartya Sen, our Nobel laureate, that on matters such as mass hunger, deprivation, morbidity and mortality brought on by a sudden collapse of entitlements, timely, relevant and reliable information provided by the Indian press or provided by credible, curated journalism has made a qualitative difference to the way public opinion is shaped and official policy is forced to respond to the situation. Amartya Sen, in Poverty and Hunger, in his book, brings out the role of the statesman, even in under British rule, in blowing the whistle on the Bengal famine of the 1942-43. And this is a valuable role that has continued for many decades. This presupposes, of course, that the press and more generally the news media are allowed by the political system, by the constitution and the laws to function with relative freedom, which naturally comes with social responsibility. The social responsibility theory that was first developed in the United States in the 1950s, I think was very influential in shaping approaches to how a free and independent press should function or perform. The idea of social responsibility of a free and independent press has proved influential over the long term, and that, I think, is important. What does it mean? There have been many textbooks on this subject, and students of journalism learn them. But the principles that underlie what I'm talking about are the following. The principle of truth-telling, that essentially means that the media must aim for factuality, for accuracy, for verification, for anticipating the likelihood of error, for providing context, background, reasonable interpretation, and careful analysis. A big ask, but this is the goal. This is what you're talking about when you're talking about the principle of truth-telling. It also means probing deep and investigating in a tough-minded way in a resourceful way to uncover facts of significance that are either concealed or are simply inaccessible for some reason. Secondly, we're talking about the principle of freedom and independence. Freedom of the press, as I mentioned, is a fundamental right guaranteed in Article 19(1)(a) of the Indian Constitution and subject to reasonable restrictions placed in Article 19(2), which is acceptable. Experience teaches us that unfree, non-independent media cannot be accountable to society. They cannot discharge their social obligation. Helplessness in the face of manipulation and establishment propaganda. Today you're talking about the Godi media. And there are some famous lines about the Godi media in another place. It runs something like this, by some lines by Humpert Wolff about the British press. You can't hope to bribe or twist, thank God, the British journalist, but considering what the man will do unasked, there is no occasion to. That was a somewhat cynical characterization of the British journalists, but it is being realized today in India, particularly on television. Apart from the loud noises, you see a kind of tireless creating propaganda, particularly on television, and this is what establishment propaganda is essentially about. But over the long term, establishment propaganda cannot win credibility, cannot win believability, cannot win trust among its audience. And we saw that during the short-lived emergency regime. Thirdly, the principle of justice. Conceptions of justice vary from the classical liberal to the Rawlsian to the radical and revolutionary. No professional prescription can be laid down for which conception of justice the journalists or media organization must follow. One level of justice which is easily formulated is fairness, the fairness doctrine, judged by widely accepted standards of reasonableness. A fairness doctrine can be laid down in a news organization. For example, if you publish a story that would damage somebody's reputation, the fairness doctrine would demand that you contact that person and say, this is the story I'm going to do, do you have a response? Before you publish it in the first instance. Sometimes you can't do it. They are not accessible, or you're so certain of your story that there's no need to do it because you're 100% sure. But as a rule, fairness would demand that you contact that person before publishing a story that could potentially damage his or her reputation or the reputation of that organization. And that's the fairness doctrine. One progressive approach to justice is the theoretical concept of entitlements, human capabilities, and functionings developed by Professor Amartya Sen. For the Indian media, the issue can be posed usefully in the way that it has been formulated in our Asian College of Journalism in Chennai, where we have a course called Covering Deprivation. I commend this to all journalism students and schools, wherever journalism is being taught in India. And this is a course that takes deprivation seriously. Deprivation in multiple forms. Socioeconomic and other forms of deprivation might be a large part of contemporary Indian reality, especially in the countryside. But covering deprivation in an informed and sustained way has not been a strong area of performance for the mainstream media in India. Deprivation, borrowing from Professor Amartya Sen's theory, refers to the failure of individuals in society to achieve basic human functionings. Among these functionings are the ability to live a long and healthy life free from avoidable disease and hunger, the opportunity to be educated, and to access to resources needed for a socially acceptable standard of living. Some forms of deprivation may apply to all members of specific groups and classes. This approach to what journalism must do, I think, will resonate in Kerala, which has, although it has certain shortages, it's not the most industrialized state, its finances are stressed, but Kerala over the long term, particularly because of the work of those like Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan and the movement that he represents, as well as other reformers, Kerala has achieved social indicators that no other state in India can boast of. Kerala is far ahead when it talks about social indicators, and this has gone on for a very long period. Whatever complaints you may have, whatever shortcomings there are in the situation in Kerala, I think we can be proud of the fact when it comes to life expectancy at birth, when it comes to total literacy, including female literacy, when it comes to health outcomes, when it comes to meeting the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic, even for migrant workers, Kerala, I think, has done us proud. And I say it not because I'm here, because this is the truth, which has to be highlighted more than it is today. I come back to the principles. Another principle is humaneness. There was a famous or notorious incident in the United States, going back to the 70s, when a young man, a jobber who was unemployed, set himself on fire in a public place. And there was a camera crew around. The cameraman started shooting the video, shooting the scene, until a bystander intervened to put out the flames. This was a stark case of what should a journalist do. We can't blame the cameraman because he was doing his job. That was the understanding of this day. But the journalist also has to be humane. And your job first, if you see somebody, we saw that during the Mandal agitation, young people setting themselves on fire. A lot of people took pictures or filmed the whole scene. I think the job of a journalist also involves acting as a public-spirited and humane citizen. And journalism in that sense is not value neutral. It, on certain things, for example, children must be in school, not part of the labor force. So on matters like this, there can only be one view, and the journalist has to perform the role of a good citizen in this respect. And then finally, the principle of contributing to the social good in whatever manner that you can. How much time do we have?
I think you can take 10, 15 minutes more. 10 minutes will be fine.
Yeah, okay. So this is the importance of journalism. These principles bring to the fore why journalism must continue to have a significant role in society and must be allowed, with the support of the people, to have that role, what the Constitution guarantees. But that is not the only problem. Today, the world has changed. The media ecosystem has changed profoundly. It has been disrupted. It began with the onset or arrival of the internet. Digital technology had a disruptive impact on journalism. The audience behavior changed, consumption habits changed over the long term, and starting with Western countries, particularly the United States and certain developed European countries, you saw the decline of journalism and great concern about the future of journalism. Is journalism on its last legs and so on? There have been tracks on this, and it has not fully recovered its vitality. The problem is that people still read. They go to digital platforms. Of course, among young people in India, the surveys show a rather depressing picture, but there is still a significant or substantial audience for news provided on digital platforms. But the problem is the revenue model. The 20th century business model for journalism was advertising paid for expansive journalism, for investigations, for sending people abroad. There's a cricket tournament somewhere, you sent two or a whole team of journalists, major newspapers, and so on. So all this was paid for by advertising. Newspaper copies were sold at a price far below the cost of production. It was hugely subsidized by advertising, and typically for a major newspaper like the Hindu or the Times of India or the Indian Express or Hindustan Times, you had about 75% at least of your revenues, total revenues, came from advertising. That has taken a huge hit. Apart from circulation taking a hit, you had the impact of the world financial crisis, and then later on the pandemic. Newspapers could not be circulated as before, therefore newspaper circulation fell, but the real cause is people have shifted their consumption habits. The audience has got away to a significant extent. So how do you deal with it? How do you produce news? You had to cut costs, and when you cut costs beyond a point, journalism suffers. The quality of journalism suffers. You pick up news from news agencies, from syndicated operations and so on, and independent journalism, investigative journalism, journalism that seeks to probe deep, suffers. And this is felt all over the place. India, the arrival of the impact of this came rather late to India compared with Western countries or even countries like China, because the internet didn't take off for a long time, but today we have reached a stage where on a par with any other developing country when it comes to internet penetration. And this has had a huge disruptive impact on technology. By disruptive, I don't just mean negative, because disruption can produce interesting results, can produce reforms, restructuring and so on, which may be badly needed. But that's not happened yet. There is no clear revenue model that offers itself today, and now AI has arrived, raising concerns. I think the impact of AI is just beginning to be felt. It's more talked about than actually felt in the newsrooms, but I think there's a great deal of apprehension that it will take jobs away, that it also will have a negative impact on levels of trust. I've myself tried many AI bots and platforms. In the Hindu, we are experimenting with this, and so far it's interesting, it's exciting, but the actual results, the actual impact, the practical impact of the arrival of generative AI, artificial intelligence, has been quite modest so far, but everybody is talking about it. So the future of journalism, journalism such as we know it, from the legacy media, from large organizations that employ a large number of people, that do the kind of work that journalists are familiar with, there are lots of concerns about that. But I am not pessimistic, because there will be a need for news, for views, and some theorists have put forward a suggestion that the core tasks of journalism will see it through. And these core tasks are verification. There is a great deal of disinformation out there, so the one task of journalism is to verify, Journalism is, in the first instance, if it's anything, is the discipline of verification. And that's one. Then you have witnessing. People still want live reporting from the field, whether it is cricket or it's serious, the budget or an agitation, a people's movement. You want reporters out in the field. And if you cannot employ them because you don't have the resources, then I think journalism is going to suffer. Then you have the making sense function. It's not just about reporting news. You have to help people make sense by providing context, by providing analysis, by even offering judgments, editorial judgments on this, but providing also room for the debate, somebody to dispute your editorial judgment. And that I think is important. And last but perhaps the most important, investigation. Data journalism is taking off in India. AI is going to help in this task, provided you don't just put out AI stories, but verify them. Use a human to edit and verify what the AI has been able to do, because it greatly helps you to sift through data, not just provide summaries, but pick out things that will take a huge amount of effort for journalists, humans to do. Hundreds of hours, it can help to do it, but provided you verify. And I think if you do these tasks, I believe that India is large enough, diverse enough, talented enough, and resourceful enough to be able to support the kind of journalism that our people deserve. Because there are many prophets of doom, of decline, people who only talk about the gaudy media, people who say that there's no independent press in India or no independent news media in India. I think these are exaggerated. And it's going to be very, very hard to suppress voices of dissent, because they are also affected by politics and by social movements. So I would conclude on the note that we have a mixed picture. There are many concerns, there are apprehensions, there are threats, all reflected in these international rankings and various other stories, statements by the Editors Guild of India, by various press clubs and so on. People do stand up and protest, at least through statements, challenges in the courts, higher courts. So I think I can end on an optimistic note, but it's going to be a challenging time ahead. And on that note, I thank the chair for giving me this time.
Thank you, Mr. N. Ram, for that very enlightening talk. I'll just summarize what Mr. N. Ram has been sharing with us on this big occasion, on the day final or the finale of Peruma Talks. അദ്ദേഹം മീഡിയ ടുഡേ, മാധ്യമങ്ങൾ ഇന്ന് എന്ന നാമധേയത്തിൽ തുടങ്ങുകയും ബാലഗംഗാധർ തിലക്, അതുപോലെ MK ഗാന്ധിജി അവരുടെ പേരിലുണ്ടായ ബ്രിട്ടീഷുകാർ അടിച്ചേൽപ്പിച്ച കരിനിയമങ്ങളും, അതിനുശേഷം പഴയ കാലത്തുണ്ടായ അദ്ദേഹം ഹിന്ദുവിൻ്റെ കുടുംബത്തിൽ നിന്ന് വന്ന ആളാണ്. 1880കളിൽ ഹിന്ദു പത്രത്തിൻ്റെ ആവിർഭാവവും വളർച്ചയും പതുക്കെ ചെറിയ രീതിയിൽ അദ്ദേഹം അവതരിപ്പിക്കുകയുണ്ടായി. ആർട്ടിക്കിൾ 19(1)A അതുപോലെ ആർട്ടിക്കിൾ 19(2) ഈ രണ്ട് ആർട്ടിക്കിൾസിനെയും, നമ്മുടെ ഭരണഘടനയിലെ ആർട്ടിക്കിൾസിനെ അദ്ദേഹം പരാമർശിക്കുകയുണ്ടായി. മാധ്യമ സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യത്തെ എങ്ങനെ നമ്മുടെ ഭരണഘടനയിൽ സംരക്ഷിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. എന്നാൽ അതിന് കുറേ നിയന്ത്രണങ്ങളുമുണ്ട്. പക്ഷേ കാലക്രമത്തിൽ മാധ്യമങ്ങളുടെ രൂപവും ഭാവവും അലകും പിടിയും ഒക്കെ മാറുകയും പിന്നീട് ഒരു കാലഘട്ടത്തിൽ എത്തിയപ്പോൾ 1975-77 അടിയന്തരാവസ്ഥ വരികയും പത്ര സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യത്തിന് വലിയ രീതിയിൽ നിയന്ത്രണങ്ങൾ വരികയും ചെയ്തത് അദ്ദേഹം പറയുകയുണ്ടായി. പിന്നീട് ടെലിവിഷൻ മീഡിയ 1980-കളിൽ നമുക്കറിയാം, 1980-കളിലാണ് നമ്മൾ ടെലിവിഷൻ വലിയ രീതിയിൽ ഇന്ത്യയിലേക്ക് കടന്നു വരികയും അന്നാണ് നമ്മൾ എൻ റാമിനെ പോലുള്ള ആളുകളെ വി ബിഗാൻ വാച്ചിങ് യുവർ ടോക്സ് ഓൺ ദ ടെലിവിഷൻ ഇൻ ദ ലേറ്റ് 1980s and early 1990s, and that was the time when we all enjoyed your talks and we all had a dream to have a talk and discussion with you. In fact, this is a big occasion offered by Peruma Talks 2025 for that dream to come true. A big person from India's journalism, a big person from a big establishment called The Hindu is here. പിന്നീട് അദ്ദേഹം സ്റ്റീഫൻ സാക്കറുടെ അടുത്ത കാലത്തുണ്ടായ ഇൻ്റർവ്യൂവിനെ പറ്റി പറയുകയുണ്ടായി BBC-യിൽ. അത് നമുക്ക് നെറ്റിൽ യൂട്യൂബിൽ ചെന്നാൽ കിട്ടുകയെന്ന് പറയുകയുണ്ടായി. പക്ഷേ 2014 ശേഷമുള്ള വളരെ പ്രതികൂലമായ സാഹചര്യത്തെപ്പറ്റി അദ്ദേഹം പറയുകയുണ്ടായി. 180 രാജ്യങ്ങളുടെ ഇടയിൽ 159-ാമത്തെ സ്ഥാനമാണ് പത്രസ്വാതന്ത്ര്യം സംബന്ധിച്ച് നമുക്ക് ഉള്ളത്. അപ്പം വളരെ പിന്നോട്ടാണ് പത്രസ്വാതന്ത്ര്യം സംബന്ധിച്ച് നമുക്കുള്ളത് എന്ന് അദ്ദേഹം പറയുകയുണ്ടായി. പിന്നീട് ന്യൂസ് ക്ലിക്കിൻ്റെ മേലെ പ്രഖ്യാപിച്ച പല നിയന്ത്രണങ്ങളും പിന്നെ ഒരുപാട് അറസ്റ്റുകളും മൃണാൾ പാണ്ഡെ, രാജ്ദീപ് സർദേശായി പോലുള്ള വ്യക്തികൾ നേരിടേണ്ടി വന്ന വെല്ലുവിളികളെ പറ്റിയും ഭീതിയുടെ അന്തരീക്ഷത്തെ പറ്റിയും പിന്നെ പല പത്ര സ്ഥാപനങ്ങളും സ്വകാര്യ കമ്പനികൾ ഏറ്റെടുക്കുന്ന ചുറ്റുപാടുകൾ ഉരുത്തിരിഞ്ഞ് വന്നതും ഒക്കെ അദ്ദേഹം പറയുകയുണ്ടായി. പക്ഷേ അവസാന ഭാഗത്താണ് അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ഭാഷണത്തിലുള്ള 5 പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട കാര്യങ്ങൾ, അദ്ദേഹം 6 പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഒരു പത്ര സ്ഥാപനത്തിന്, പത്രമാധ്യമങ്ങൾക്ക് വേണ്ട ഉത്തരവാദിത്തങ്ങൾ. ഒന്ന്, സത്യം കൃത്യമായി അവതരിപ്പിക്കുക എന്നുള്ളതിനെ പറ്റിയും ചുരുക്കിയിട്ട് ഞാൻ പറയുന്നുള്ളൂ, മറ്റു അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞ കാര്യങ്ങളെല്ലാം പറയുന്നില്ല. പിന്നീട് സത്യത്തിന് ശേഷം പിന്നീട് വന്ന പത്രമാധ്യമങ്ങളുടെ സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യം എങ്ങനെ ആണ് നമ്മൾ നിലനിർത്തി പോരേണ്ടതെന്നുള്ളതിനെ പറ്റിയും, നീതി എങ്ങനെ, ഇത് വളരെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ഒരു കാര്യമാണ് അദ്ദേഹം അവതരിപ്പിച്ചത്. നീതിയും അതുപോലെ തന്നെ 4-ാമത്തെ നീതിയോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ അദ്ദേഹം പിന്നീട് പറഞ്ഞൊരു കാര്യം ന്യായം, നീതിയും ന്യായത്തിനും വേണ്ടി പത്രമാധ്യമങ്ങൾ എങ്ങനെ നിലകൊള്ളണം, അതും ഇതും വിളിച്ചു പറയാതെ സത്യാവസ്ഥയെ പരമാവധി കോണ്ടെക്സ്റ്റ് വെച്ചുകൊണ്ട്, സന്ദർഭം വെച്ചുകൊണ്ട്, ഡേറ്റ വെച്ചുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ വളരെ കൃത്യമായിട്ട് അപഗ്രഥനാത്മകമായി തന്നെ അവതരിപ്പിക്കേണ്ട കാര്യമുണ്ടെന്നുള്ളതാണ് പറയുന്നത്. പിന്നീട് അമർത്യ സെന്നിൻ്റെ പുസ്തകങ്ങളെയും ലേഖനങ്ങളെയും എഴുത്തിനെയും ആസ്പദമാക്കി സമൂഹത്തിൽ കഷ്ടപ്പാടുകൾ ഒരുപാട് രീതിയിൽ പുറംതള്ളപ്പെട്ട, പാർശ്വവൽക്കരിക്കപ്പെട്ട ആൾക്കാരെ പറ്റി നമ്മളെപ്പോഴും പത്രമാധ്യമങ്ങൾക്ക് ഫോക്കസ് കൊടുക്കേണ്ടതുള്ള കാര്യം പറയുകയുണ്ടായി. പിന്നെ മാനവികതയെപ്പറ്റി പത്രപ്രവർത്തകർ മാനുഷിക പരിഗണനകൾക്ക് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മാനുഷികതയ്ക്ക് ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ പ്രാധാന്യം കൊടുക്കേണ്ടതുണ്ട്. അദ്ദേഹം അമേരിക്കയിലെ ഒരാൾ ആത്മഹത്യ ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യം പറയുകയുണ്ടായി. പിന്നെ പുതിയ കച്ചവട രീതികളും നമ്മൾ എങ്ങനെ വാർത്തകൾ നമ്മൾ ഉപഭോഗ വസ്തുവായി ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നതിനെ പറ്റി പറയുകയുണ്ടായി. അപ്പോൾ ഇത്രയും കാര്യങ്ങളാണ് അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ഈ പ്രഭാഷണത്തിൽ വന്ന കാര്യങ്ങൾ. ഇതിനെ വെച്ചുകൊണ്ട് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ, അഭിപ്രായങ്ങളൊക്കെ വളരെ കൃത്യമായിട്ട് നീട്ടിപ്പിടിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ നമ്മുടെ സമയമൊക്കെ പോവും. അതുകൂടെ നിങ്ങൾ കണക്കിലെടുത്തുകൊണ്ട് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മലയാളത്തിൽ മലയാളത്തിലും ചോദിക്കാവുന്നതാണ്. ഐ കൻ ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ഇറ്റ് ഫോർ ഇഫ് സംബഡി ആസ്ക് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് ഇൻ മലയാളം, ഐ കൻ ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ഇറ്റ് ഇൻ ടു ഇംഗ്ലീഷ്. താങ്ക് യു. ഓവർ ടു ദ ഓഡിയൻസ് ഫോർ ദ ഇൻറ്ററാക്റ്റീവ് സെഷൻ. Thank you. Yes, I just oh yes, I just summarized.
Sir, Sir, myself Shwe PP. I'm a MA history student at Government Brennan College. Thanks for the lecture. And my question is, the pressure from government and cooperative sector is made a fear in journalists as like seduction, jailing, killing. The selective targeting journalists. Around 20 journalists were killed as like Gauri Lankesh. It is a threat for independent journalism. How can we make to impose the 6 principles? And what they are making against the constitution, and how can we impose the article 19(1)(a) and 19(2)? Thus we can how can we overcome it? Thus they try to impose, as like Antonio Gramsci say, the cultural hegemony through their Godi media and the words of universities. Please comment on that.
Thank you. The reference was to 20 journalists being murdered in connection with their work. This has been documented by the Committee to Protect Journalists, or CPJ, which is based in New York. Every case has been meticulously investigated, verified, and it's available on the website. This is 20 journalists from 2014. In the previous decade, 10 journalists were murdered, bad enough, but it's increased. The killers, and these are journalists murdered in connection with their work, not in some private dispute. That's the significance of it. And these have been killed by many actors. I'm not talking only about the state here, because many of them are contractors. And these are, you mentioned Gauri Lankesh. Shujat was also another editor in Kashmir, was killed, but most of the 20 are freelancers or journalists in small towns, particularly in Hindi-speaking India, Hindi-speaking states, where they were murdered because they were investigating either crime or corruption. And they were brave journalists, and they were defenseless. Some of them were just killed with guns, others were run over by large vehicles. But as serious as the number of murders is the fact that India figures in what is known as the Global Impunity Index. Impunity is journalists are murdered in connection with their work. The matter is not resolved, either acquittal or conviction. It goes on. Either there's a cover-up or gross inefficiency in the investigation in these cases. So India, I usually say, India is a founding and permanent member of this club of shame called the Global Impunity Index, published by the committee, the same organization, or the Committee to Protect Journalists, which is, I think, is hugely respected. There are also journalists who are arrested, including the Hindu's Ahmedabad correspondent Mahesh Langa, because he got hold of some documents, and I think the police have seized them. Mahesh Langa is still in jail, nearly 6 months, I think. He's got bail in most cases, but when you get bail in one, another agency comes and files another case, in the latest instance by enforcement. He's got bail, I think, in most of the cases, one is left. But there are journalists in Kashmir. Kashmir is a totally different situation. What prevails in Kashmir? Press freedom has been extinguished in Kashmir. It's been reported, not enough in the mainstream media, but it's been reported. The Press Council of India has not taken it up. But to your key question, what can be, how should we deal with it? I think we have to break this fear. by collective action. The resistance cannot be episodic, not just for NewsClick, not just for the Wicked cartoon, because in all those cases people protest. And all the major organizations protest, press clubs protest in different parts of India, even in Orissa, which is under BJP rule. They protest. The Editors Guild of India has taken very good positions on this. Women's network, Women Journalists Network have taken strong positions on this. So that is good. But resistance, if it is episodic, cannot succeed. It has to be sustained, and the only way to beat it is to stand up. And you go to courts when you can, otherwise mobilize people, get the support of whichever party, including the ruling party if they're willing to come on particular issues. And I think you can't avoid politics here. You have to be even-handed, approach everyone, and also try to persuade those in authority that this is wrong. But basically you got to stand up, and that is why you got to value journalism. If you say, what's the big deal? I mean, it's somebody else's problem. So citizens, people have to value journalism and fight it as their own cause. Then I think it will succeed, and I see some of that happening, which is why I'm not, it's not hopeless at all. It is working out. And then, as I mentioned, courts also give relief. Not consistently. There are four, I think right now there are 4 journalists, including Mahesh Langa, who are detailed, as far as I know. 20 murdered over the decade. 4 journalists still in jail, some of them for years. It's not a huge number because there is still some relief provided by courts, but it has to be sustained. So the only way it will work is if people stand up and really go out on the streets if this happens. In the case of the Wicked cartoon, the High Court restored brought the website back to life. But they said till the case is decided, please remove your cartoon, which they did. It's not totally satisfactory, but it's relief because the website is back at work. And there's just one cartoon, and that cartoon is out on the social media everywhere. Apart from those who got it through subscriptions like me. Other newspapers published it, so the cartoon is out there and it can't be suppressed. So there are possibilities of getting relief from courts, and as I said, in the most recent period, the Supreme Court of India has asserted its independence. In the latest instance, I mentioned it because it really took on the government here, both the union government and the state government in Tamil Nadu, and I think Kerala has cases. The same, I think Kerala will get the same justice. Right now, those bills that are gone, and the former Attorney General of India, Attorney General for India, Mr. K.K. Venugopal, my old friend, is appearing for the state of Kerala in this case. And I can guarantee that Kerala will win this because the principles, the reasoning behind this judgment, what has been laid down as the powers of the governor and even the president. So these have to be reported widely in the media and discussed, critically discussed. Some people may not agree with all that the court has said, but this has to be not sidelined, these issues. They have to be discussed in detail and in depth in the media because they are interesting. And for people, and also you have to create interest in matters like this. If they do it, I think we can win back a large measure of our independence.
Next question.
Good question.
നമസ്കാരം, എൻ്റെ പേര് സലീം താഴേക്കോറ, കണ്ണൂർ ജില്ലയിലെ പിണറായി സ്വദേശിയാണ്. ഇവിടെ സിറ്റിസൺ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റ് നേരിടുന്ന, അതായത് മുമ്പ് നമുക്ക് പ്രിൻ്റ് മീഡിയ, റേഡിയോ, ടെലിവിഷനായിരുന്നു ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നെങ്കിൽ ഇന്ന് സിറ്റിസൺ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകളുണ്ട്. ഈ സിറ്റിസൺ ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾ നേരിടുന്ന ഏറ്റവും വലിയ ഒരു പ്രയാസം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ചില വാർത്തകളോ പ്രസ്താവനകളോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ചില സമൂഹത്തെ ബാധിക്കുന്ന കാര്യങ്ങളോ പ്രസിദ്ധീകരിക്കുമ്പോൾ സാമുദായിക ലഹളകൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കാൻ വേണ്ടി അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സമൂഹത്തിൽ ലഹള പടർത്തുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടി ഒക്കെ പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ട് അവരുടെ അഭിപ്രായ പ്രകടനത്തെ തടസ്സം നിൽക്കുകയും കേസെടുക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു രീതി നമ്മുടെ നാട്ടിലുണ്ട്. അത്തരം നിയമങ്ങൾ മാറ്റേണ്ടതല്ലേ?
There is a thing called citizens journalism. So when citizens journalism, within the corpus of citizens journalism, when journalists write about issues, it is twisted, the news is twisted, and communal tensions are aroused, communal problems are aroused. So what is the solution to that?
Yes, first, I think when the first references to citizen journalism, the idea came about, there was everyone was looking forward to this. But just as there are good citizens and bad citizens, citizens who try to divide society and spread hate, particularly on communal lines or caste lines, I think that gets reflected in the media, and citizen journalism has taken a big hit because of the phenomenon called disinformation. I want to make a distinction between misinformation and disinformation. And in the current discussion in on professional platforms, that distinction is made, is quite important. Misinformation is just incorrect news. It's not deliberate. It's not motivated. It happens all the time, and you can correct it. It also causes harm, but it's capable of being corrected. Disinformation is deliberate, motivated, toxic falsehoods, usually with an agenda to divide society or to spread or raise, build hate, generate hate against particular sections of society, or in some cases, individuals, including women journalists who have been the target of such, dirty tricks. We've seen that in Tamil Nadu, we've seen that elsewhere. I don't know about Kerala. So they are trying to control it, those in power, through legislation. The intermediaries rules, amendment rules in 2021, and now the broadcast services legislation, which is in the works. They try to bring all of it under the definition of broadcasting, or including digital news providers, and they want to impose the burden of onerous regulation in the name of self-regulation, but in different stages. The final stage will be, the third stage will be a committee of secretaries who will decide, who will be the Supreme Court in this matter. So they are trying to, in a clumsy way, in a crude way, trying to respond to the challenge of citizen journalism gone rogue, or citizen journalism which does its job correctly. So it's two-pronged. The objective is said to be to take on hate, hate politics, hate speech, hate images meant to inflame communal passions and divisions. That's one part. The other part is to muzzle dissent, criticism, independent journalism, independent views, exposés, and so on. So it's a very complex issue, and my impression is that they are not very efficient in tackling this issue at either end. Those who are genuinely concerned with damping down the communal situation, trying to prevent it from escalating on the one hand, and on the other hand, those who, the bad actors who try to curb and restrain or suppress the expression of criticism or dissent, differences. So it's the subject of much debate. I'm part of an initiative sponsored by the BBC called the Trusted News Initiative, which is largely concerned with this, with disinformation spreading on the social media because the professional media can't compete in scale with Facebook or Google or Twitter and so on. They are giants, they're hegemons, digital hegemons. And there are now tens of them which compete in the media ecosystem with or against professional news providers, whether they're part of the legacy media or the new media or television, podcasts, videos put out by the Ravish Kumars and the Dhruv Rathis. They are simply not competent enough to handle this. And that bill is, I think, it'll be very interesting to see what final shape that bill which was introduced, and then I think even the allies had problems with it. So they had to refer it to a committee. It'll be worth following that attentively, what's happening to this bill. And if it is enacted, if it becomes law, then what will our higher courts say about this? When they are taken, surely they'll be taken to the high courts and the Supreme Court of India. So I think it's going to be very interesting.
Good evening, sir. I am Dr. Jayasurian Vengilat. You have narrated beautifully about the transformation of journalism from true journalism to present type of journalism. Thank you so much, sir. My question is, no emergency at our country now, but it is tougher than emergency as far as media concerned. No media could able to criticize the authority or union government. Sir, what is the future of our country at present scenario of infactual information or propagating propagandas?
I don't agree that this situation is worse than during the emergency, because I lived during the emergency and it was total censorship. Journalists were detained. Of course, there was not this kind of communal movement at that stage, but there was an authoritarian ruler, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi at the center, no question about it. She didn't tolerate any dissent at that point. She had done major achievements before that on Bangladesh, on introducing some major measures which she, Garibi Hatao and all that, didn't really go very far, but she had won renown internationally, stood up to the United States. But after that, immediately, it took a nosedive, governance took a nosedive, and during the emergency, it was impossible. I don't think there was a single newspaper which stood up, whatever people say today, because I remember very clearly, not the Hindu, not the Indian Express, not the Times of India, not Hindustan Times, not the Manorama Group, not the Matrubhumi Group, nobody. There was there was an underground press, underground publications with very limited circulation. They had their own role. I know some of them. No, nobody. Nobody really stood up. I think somebody published a blank page and then the censors cracked down on it. It was total. But the political situation is quite different today and in a sense more disturbing, because India has evolved and you find communalism as a political mobilization strategy come to the fore. There is majority communalism and there's also minority fundamentalism and communalisms. You see it in Kerala also, among the sections. Although Kerala is large, Tamil Nadu and Kerala are largely, I would say, substantially protected because of the emergence of secular parties, democratic parties there. But they are not absent in either state. And it is something that was cause concern. So that's a different matter, and it gets reflected in the press. Also, it's authoritarianism on many fronts. As I said, the Election Commission of India. The same Election Commission oversaw the defeat of Indira Gandhi in 1977. Complete rout. She lost her own seat. If the Election Commission had not been reasonably independent, that wouldn't have happened. Even today, the fact that the BJP in the last Lok Sabha election did not score a majority speaks to the relative independence of the election commission, not real independence. Because, first of all, selection of the members, how they are selected, the kind of propaganda that some leaders of the dominant party got away with, including the Prime Minister, some statements, they were taken to the election commission and so on. But by and large, it was not a stolen election. And those are differences, but I would not agree with the assertion. I've heard this in many places, that today we are facing a worse situation than the press. At that time, there was no television, was not a big thing. There was no internet, there were no digital media. But the press mattered, and the press was totally suppressed. And Mr. Advani made that famous statement that when you're asked to bend, you crawled, or something like that.
Next.
To the press.
Good evening, sir.
Just one second.
Sir, firstly stated that all the journalists must be truth tellers. Truth telling must be the most important part of a journalist. Now I am saying all the things in Malayalam in short ways. Sir, ഒരു സംശയം. ഈ സത്യം എന്ന് പറയുന്ന എറ്റേണൽ ട്രൂത്ത് ആണോ സാർ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്? എറ്റേണൽ ട്രൂത്ത് ആണെങ്കിൽ ഈ ലോകമേ തറവാട് എന്നാണല്ലോ ഞങ്ങളെ പഠിപ്പിച്ചത്. വസുധൈവ കുടുംബകം എന്നാണല്ലോ പഠിപ്പിച്ചത്. ഒരു ആക്സിഡൻറ്റ് വരുന്നു. ആക്സിഡൻറ്റിൽ ആ വ്യക്തിക്ക് ഹെഡ് ഇഞ്ചുറി എന്നല്ല, ബ്രെയിൻ ഇഞ്ചുറി വരുന്നു. അവരുടെ ബന്ധുക്കൾ വളരെ സ്നേഹത്തോടുകൂടി വ്യത്യസ്തമായ അവരുടെ ഓർഗൻസ് വ്യത്യസ്ത ആൾക്കാർ കൊടുക്കാനായിട്ട് തീരുമാനിക്കുന്നു. സ്വീകർത്താക്കൾ ആരാണ്? റിലീജിയൻ അറിയില്ല, കളർ അറിയില്ല, കാസ്റ്റ് അറിയില്ല, ക്രീഡ് അറിയില്ല, പ്രൊവിൻസ് അറിയില്ല, പാർട്ടി അറിയില്ല. എല്ലാവർക്കും ആർക്ക് വേണമെങ്കിലും ഇത് അക്സെപ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യാവുന്നതാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ഏറ്റവും വലിയ സത്യം എന്താണ്? ഈ ലോകം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഓൾ ദ ഹ്യൂമൻ ബീയിങ്സ് വൺ ആൻഡ് ദ സെയിം. ഈ കാര്യം പറയാതെ ഓരോ പത്രവും ഓരോ വിഭാഗീയക്കാരും അവരോട് മാത്രമാണ് ശരിയെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ് നാട്ടുകാരെ ചതിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഈ ചതിയെ ഇല്ലാതാക്കാൻ എന്താണ് ജേർണലിസ്റ്റുകൾക്ക് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുക എന്നുള്ളതാണ് എൻ്റെ ചോദ്യം. ഞാൻ ഒരു പേര് ദാസൻ.
Okay, thank you. What he says is that despite the fact that all human beings are just human beings with the same organs, internal organs and mind and body, when it comes to journalism, different journalistic establishments post different versions of one incident. Why this is happening? Isn't there a thing called absolute truth? Or what is the method of reaching the or arriving at the absolute truth? Thank you.
I won't go into the various discussion on absolute truth. When we come to journalism, we talk about things like factuality, as you see it, or verification, anticipation of error, and so on. Verify, take your time. Don't rush to print or television or digital platform. Don't just push it out. Think first, verify before, particularly on sensitive areas. So I won't go into total, absolute, the concept of, or concepts of absolute truth. It's often said that the only thing you can prove to be absolutely true are some mathematical theorems, that once it's proved, mathematicians claim, it's proved forever. In certain cases, even that is being disputed in some areas of mathematics. But other than that, claims of absolute truth, whether made by religious leaders or founders of religion and so on, I don't buy them. It's often relative. But when it comes to practical matters, there is something called truth. What you say, the same incident being covered in contrary fashion, in different and contradictory fashion, I think there's something wrong with the observers, the journalists and others who put it out. So that is a serious matter, because then biases enter the picture, and they're not doing this, the principle of truth-telling as we see it, as I understand it. You're absolutely right, and that is a major weakness of the press. There may be various factors that explain it. The competitive instinct. I want to be first. I want to make a big splash and sensationalize it. I want to bring this angle. And sometimes you cut corners and you get misled. Sometimes you deliberately invent falsehood and add things. You're dishonest as a journalist. So you keep adding color to your story. That is allowed in fiction. In what is known as literary fiction, it's allowed. That I can invent characters, I can invent color, I can invent incidents that didn't actually happen, even when I'm talking about real life people. I write a novel about Mahatma Gandhi, and I can invent. That's totally allowed in your area of literature, but in journalism, it's not allowed. And even there is something called literary journalism, where it's the borderline, where these differences are blurred. But what you speak, sir, happens, and that is a weakness of journalism.
Somebody was there. Yeah. Please come forward. Make your question brief so that we can take more questions.
It's too polite to say, make your answers brief.
Yes, we'll have two more questions.
Good evening, sir. I am Nigil Kumar. We are witnessing a kind of media practice in our country where a goat is portrayed as a dog.
Goat is portrayed as a dog among the media people. There is a practice of a goat, G-O-A-T, goat portrayed as a dog.
With the emergence of new media, such manipulative media practices are being exposed. In this context, what is the future of media practices that paid news?
Yeah, he wants your take on manipulative journalism and paid news. How it is going to mar, make or unmake the whole ambit of media.
Yeah, we are speaking about the basic phenomenon of corruption in journalism. I know situations where even in press clubs, not the members of the club, but those who cover it, a cover is handed out for coverage by, say, a company wanting something about it to be widely publicized in the press. It's there. That's at the basic foundational level. Reporters doing it. There are many who don't accept this. Then the phenomenon of paid news surfaced in India some years ago, because before elections, even news editors and senior people in the media went around saying this, collecting money for publicizing in the guise of news, not as advertisements, but in the guise of news. Actually, what should be the subject matter of advertising was palmed off as news. Yes, that's the phenomenon of paid news, and the Press Council of India did some investigations of it and put out its thing. Manipulation, if you're talking about digital manipulation or by AI, at the moment, most of the what is called fake news or fake images would be what is called shallow fake, easily detectable. Deep fake involves a lot of expertise in the use of AI and digital technology, and usually experts can find out, like if somebody photoshops a picture, experienced photographers will instantly spot it. But if it's deep fake, then I think you're getting into areas. But fortunately, deep fakes constitute a relatively small part of what is out there. But people get easily fooled also by shallow fakes, things that are obvious to experts and practitioners in the particular field. People miss that and are taken in. It is a fact. Just as now there are reference to WhatsApp universities, all kind, particularly older people, when they get messages, they believe it. A lot of them believe it. And so this is a major problem, and the antidote to it, those who can counter this, apart from scholars, philosophers, professionals, lawyers, you have journalists, because it's a general field. You can draw from all these sources. You take it up seriously, and I can recommend Alt News. I don't know if many of you have seen it. Alt News is a small operation, brilliantly run. I would say it's world class. You can't pick out every bit of false information or so on, but they select what is relevant, what is topical, what is important very often, and investigate it and bring out the results. This kind of fact-checking work has to be publicized and taken out to the people, so that they are not taken in by what you say, manipulated information or journalism. And there are also Boom and some others. Some major media organizations themselves have fact-checking units, but depending on their biases, many of them are biased, they will do more fact-checking against party X, which is in the opposition, and less fact-checking on statements and actions of party Y, which is the ruling party. It could be in a state or in the center. So you got to watch that. But I recommend something like Alt News. Its findings should be widely publicized. That's the challenge. It's because other media will not publicize what Alt News does. So they have to do their own marketing, if you like.
We have a small time problem, because from the bigger stage there is a request for us to kind of wind up by 7:05. Two questions which came right at the beginning of the interactive session. I will read out very briefly. I think you can take both these questions together, because more by the tenor of these questions, theme and tenor of these questions, more or less they are similar. One is by Mugundan P. Is Mr. Mugundan P here, or has he left? Kindly light on how have the rulers hijacked the media in India within a short span of period. Already you have focused on that. And now Mr. Mustafa Kamal is there. Is Mr. Mustafa Kamal? Yeah, Mustafa, hello. He is a retired university officer. I will read out your question very briefly, because there is the want of time. How can you substantiate on the optimistic views on the future of journalism in India? Thank you. I think with that, with the response to these two questions,
I think that's a hard task, but I think there's no real time to do it. But I can recommend some work, some literature on this. On the first question, I would recommend this chapter in this book by Rajdeep Sardesai on the election, 2024 election, chapter 14, which is titled, "You Are the Gaudy Media." I think it gives you a very good overview of the challenges faced by the media and also those who counter it. So I think I'll restrict myself to just these references because of the shortage of time. But
I have one last question. Gentleman there, he wanted to ask something. Please make it as brief as possible, because the Chief Minister is also there at the next event. There is you can take your time, but I will take both those questions in together, but make it as brief as possible.
Yeah, I'll
please.
keep it short. Thank you. Thanks for being here today. Nice talking. Nice to hear your speech. Sir, my question is basically we all valued true journalism, where we saw news delivered with impartiality and integrity. Now, the landscape of the journalism has changed dramatically, as you mentioned in your speech as well, in the past 10 years. So my question to you is there a chance to go back to true journalism, or have we reached the point of no return, or we crossed that point of no return?
No, we have not crossed the point of no return. I
Good to
think
hear
there
that.
is still hope, and we have to fight for it.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Gentleman, yeah. Sorry, there is a person there waiting in the wings. Yeah, they have to take down your names, you know. Oh yeah, please give your name.
Good evening, sir. I am Prabhakaran. Now my concern is that what we can see today is the sad side of growing young generation relying solely on social media, and we can see a scenario where printed media is moving away from them. If this scenario continues, the situation of our printed media will become unstable. Under these circumstances, what kind of message do you want to give to our young generation on this occasion?
Last question of the session, please.
They are moving away from the printed media. The print media is still trying very hard to reach them and to make them committed readers. My message is, it doesn't matter whether you want to read serious news providers in print or on digital platforms. It's the journalism that matters, not the platform. If journalism can find a way to reach them on these digital platforms or even on mobile phones, there will be a certain loss, because there's only so much you can read on a mobile phone or a tablet. But as compared with a printed newspaper or on your desktop or laptop or whatever, in a serious way, you try to reach them. So it's hard work, and the only message can be that journalism is valuable. Unless you inform yourself of current affairs in some way, we may not be the only source, but I can't see any other doing the kind of things that journalism has been doing over a very long period, well over 2 centuries in India, and a bit longer in some Western countries. So that's, as far as we know, it is a vital part of equipping yourself to be a citizen, a responsible citizen, an active citizen who has a sense of self-esteem, he or she, dignity, self-respect, wanting to make a difference in society. So if you really want to be that, you have to equip yourself with the information and knowledge that is not easily available anywhere else. In other words, in short, you cannot afford to bypass the media or journalism or somebody who provides this information, which is essential for your own development and for the development of society. That's the message that we must give to the young people. And you also need to do media literacy at the school level. The ability to distinguish between real, reliable, trustworthy, and false. Not easy, but it requires that education. And many organizations have talked about the need to do it, but I don't see it happening on a big scale in India yet. But we need media, what is called internationally, media literacy programs at the school level. Those involved in the field of education can decide at what level you give that seriously. But it has to be given at some level in the school, during the schooling of a boy or girl. That has to be a universal provision in India if the message is to go through, and I think that will work.
Thank you, Padma Bhushan, Mr. N. Ram, for that very enlightening session, which was comprised of two sessions. One was your talk per se, and the second one was the interactive session. Thank you all the wonderful people who raised questions and queries. Really, we are a little bit apologetic to those who really wanted to ask more questions. Before we have the best question of the day, may I, on behalf of Pinarayi Peruma 2025, place on record our deep felt gratitude to you, Sri N. Ram. Please give him a big hand for taking all his time and energy to come and spend
the patience to listen to this and to participate in it as you have. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just as a closing remark, I have to tell you, very recently, about 2 weeks ago, I was there at teaching a batch of composite batch of senior students, employed people, retired people. And there was a session where I had to teach them how to read a newspaper. I simply carried two copies of the Hindu of 2 different days, and I was telling him how a newspaper can be very informative, very analytic, very revelatory, as you said, very investigative. So those are things which we as readers have to be very, very aware of, and I am told that most of the politicians in Delhi and Trivandrum, they first read the Hindu before reading their favorite newspapers in their vernacular. That's the big recognition that we can give you. And for the best question, the chief guest will give the award to the best question of the day. The best question has come up from Mr. Mugundan P. Mr. Mugundan P, I request your presence on the stage, and please be here to get your award.
Thank you, sir. To present the memento to the chair of the session, may I call upon Member of Parliament, Dr. Shivadasan V, to present the memento to the chair, Dr. N. Sajan. I invite Dr. N. Sajan to receive the memento from Dr. V. Shivadasan, Member of Parliament. Thank you, sir. With this, we have come to the end of Peruma Talk Series 2025, organized by under Pinarayi Peruma 2025. I am here with a bunch of thanks. On behalf of Peruma Talks, I sincerely gratitude to the press reporters, print media, sound, camera and technical crew, especially social media. On behalf of Peruma Talks, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Pinarayi Peruma General Committee Chairperson, General Convener, and all the subcommittee members, including all the volunteers who were instrumental in managing the stage, managing the audience, for their unwavering support. On behalf of the Peruma Talks 2025 committee, I would like to express sincere gratitude to the Government Brennan College student officials who were instrumental in organizing Peruma Talk 2025 in a professional way. Let me also express my deep sense of gratitude on behalf of Peruma Talks to Dr. N. Sarjan, who have been acting as the anchor for the Peruma Talks 2025. On behalf of Peruma Talks 2025, special thanks to local self-government Penarayi, the volunteers, light and sound. A bunch of thanks to all the Peruma Talks committee members who stood by me on all occasions. And I would also like to, on behalf of Penarayi Peruma committee, I would also like to express a deep sense of gratitude, greatly indebted to the resourceful additional private secretary to the Chief Minister of the State of Kerala, Major Dinesh Bhaskaran, and his office staff, Sri K. Pradeepan. I profusely place on record the gratitude of Peruma Talks 2025 to you, sir, for extending all your support and sustenance to the event which hopefully will be hosted in the years to come. I hope I haven't left out anybody here in my vote of thanks. If at all I have omitted anybody, I do place on record my deep felt thanks to him or her. Thank you all. And the last but the best, we are indebted to the Honorable Chief Minister. Under his guidance and supervision, we could get the services of all the leading and prominent speakers across the country. Thank you all. Let us stand for national anthem. जनगणमन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलति तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तव जय गादा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे. Thank you. I invite all the Peruma Talks committee members to have a photo session with Padma Bhushan N. Ram.